Welcome back. This is 101 Dark Roast with Lance Hedrick. We're going to be looking at how to make the most of your dark roast on the Meticulous. Of course, you're always free to go in, play with your profiles, but this is if you're wanting that starting guide and what kind of profiles and what type of approach give you the best body, the most crema, all these different things. Now, the coffee I'll be using today is from one of my favorite Neapolitan-style roasters, actually based in Naples, called Saka. It's their Crema Bar. So it's a proper dark roast with some Robusta in it, some some Arabica in it, gets you that nice, buttery, creamy texture. It's fantastic. Now, right off the bat, I want to say this machine is capable of producing whatever body you're wanting to give it. If you want to have a really thick, vibrant, intense crema body, you can do that. If you want to have some of a less body, you can do that. It all depends on how you're wanting to infuse the coffee. This can truly replicate any spring machine because it is piston driven. We all know, and we have known for many years, that the best body comes from these spring lever stop machines or just direct levers. This piston pushed, no head space type of extraction. We can automate that with the Meticulous. So what I'm going to be using in today's video is essentially a recipe that a guy named Damien created on the Decent Espresso machine some years ago that's emulating the Londinium R24. So this is the Londinium LRV2 that was ported over by someone in order for it to work with the Meticulous. Obviously, the way it was built for something that is pump driven, it has to have a completely different process than something that is actually emulating some sort of piston where you lift and water infiltrates, creates a water column. So this is what we're going to be using today with darker roasted coffees. You do want to have a bit of a lower flow rate. Those Slayer style shots work. You could do a Slayer style shot on this. That's not my preference. For these, I like to emulate lever style shots. So we're going to pull the Saka, which I have on the ground here. We're going to start pulling some espresso and look at styling that in. Now, as we talked about in our more advanced understanding of these different variables, we know that this style of shot does not excel with lightly roasted coffees, and this has been noted for a long time. Light roast coffee doesn't really have the integrity to feel these high pressures and go through them without kind of falling apart and getting bad coffees. And this is one of the reasons why in so many specialty shops you have people complaining about sour espresso. And it's because baristas find the longer they pull the shot, the more bitter and astringent it gets because that puck integrity just doesn't last under normal shot parameters. So then they start pulling ristrettos, which can be really intensely sour for a lot of people. I believe truly that the baristas are enjoying those, but a lot of you simply do not. And it's because light roasts just don't mesh well with these types of machines. Even if you do high enough temperature, if you do a specific, even a lower pressure, whatever, the people have found that largely, unless you're doing something really weird with your spring lever, your lever machine, people don't enjoy the typical lever style shot of lighter roast. They tend to do a lot better with darker. So that's what we're kind of focusing on today. In addition, I am using the niche. This is not my favorite grinder for, really big body, but it does do a solid job on giving you that wide polymodal style distribution where you have a big wide area for where you're grinding, which allows me to grind at a coarser particle peak, which actually improves our crema. If you notice, go down to Naples where so many shops have their lever machines, they're using triple baskets. A 54 millimeter La San Marco triple shot because they're wanting to have a really deep bed, which allows for a much coarser grind, which gives you a ton of crema. So essentially, a simple rule is the coarsest you can go while still maintaining some semblance of pressure and a good time of extraction under these, higher pressure style shots, the more crema you're going to get. Now, of course, you want to make sure you're using freshly roasted coffee, darker roasted coffee. Robusta Canafora is going to give you the best bet. Doing all this, though, is going to give you the best chance at having crema. But in addition to that, a grinder like the niche or like a Rober, some sort of, high fines producing conical burr set, something like the 71 millimeter Rober is known as like Goo King. So you do something like that, you're going to get even more texture on the shots. You're not really going to have a great experience if you try to do darker roasted coffees on something like a 98 millimeter high uniformity burr from SSP. That's just not going to give you what you want. And the reason is because you're going to have to go a lot finer on the particle peak. Actually, what's going to happen, we're chaotic here. On a particle size distribution, if we have our microns down here, let's say we have like 100 microns, which a lot of times people say fines are under 100, whatever. We have like 200 here. Whoops, that was not a 2. And then let's say it comes over here to, 1,000 over here. Our peak particle is where the majority of our particles are. So let's say we have a peak particle. Let's say this is 500, which is not really espresso size, but let's say it's 500. Let's say it's 500, and that's our peak particle. That's where most of our particles are. You'll have something that looks like this for a particle size distribution, meaning you'll have a hump of volume that are fines, and then you'll have your particle distribution up top, right? Now, whenever you have a grinder that produces a bigger hump of fines, so let's do a different color. Now let's say that this right here is a pretty unimodal grinder. Let's say that's a pretty narrow peak. There's a little, hump for boulders over here. And then we have a small peak down here for fines. Now, if there's another grinder, like let's say this is a 98 millimeter flapper. This right here would be something like the niche. It would be more like this. More like that, where you'd have a wider particle peak. So this would be our peak, pretty similar to the other, but it would be much wider because it's producing grounds at 400 and at 800 a lot more regularly for that peak, right? Down here, you have a lot more of those spines. This one has a much smaller peak. This one has a much wider peak. So what happens is if you want to dial in both of these at the same extraction, so this, I did say 500, but let's say this is actually 200 for espresso. The niche at this, let's say it pulls perfectly. Okay, let's say the niche is pulling at a 30-second shot because that's what we have for our lever style shot. At the same grind size or same peak particle, you are not going to be able to have the pressure held with something like the 98HU, which this one would pull at 12 seconds and wouldn't reach pressure at all. It might reach 4 bar and then go to nothing. So with something that's this unimodal and with this few of fines, you're not getting the resistance we need for P equals R times flow, all right? Resistance times flow. We're not getting enough resistance, okay? So in order to increase the resistance, we will have to do yet another color. We will need to grind with something like the 98HU so that the hump is here, then the peak particle is here. So then right off the bat, we're starting with a much finer peak particle. So if this is 200, we're now at like 128, just random numbers, right? But the idea is to get across, now we're going a ton finer in order to get the requisite resistance to have a 30-second shot, right? So we started here, which was around 200. We got a 12-second shot. Now we went much finer to get that 30 seconds because we're automatons. We have to hit the right time and the right ratio. Now with the 98HU, we're at a much finer peak particle just to get the same espresso. So depending on your grinder, you're going to have way different experiences. So if you have something like a niche or a 71 millimeter rover, you're going to be able to get a much more balanced shot without going as fine as if you were to use something like 64 millimeter SSP multipurpose burrs or 98 millimeter HU burrs or 80 millimeter brew burrs or something like that, which are going to give you a very unimodal peak. You're going to have really underwhelming coffee if you're using dark roasted coffees. So I would recommend highly, if you're a dark roast enthusiast, do not stay with just a kind of clarity monster grinder. You will not enjoy the coffee shots very much. I can almost guarantee that. Rely on something that does produce more fines, that does produce a more wide distribution, more polymodal, so to speak, because it's going to give you a lot more interesting coffee, a lot more balanced coffee. In addition to that, it's going to give you a lot more resistance without having to go as fine, which means a lot less bitterness and more crema, better tactile experience overall. Okay. So with all these variables that we can control, obviously the grinder is something we have to take into account. It kind of limits the profiles that we're going to want to do. With something like the niche, I would not necessarily recommend using it for these lighter roasted forward profiles, like the higher flow things. As we talked about on the 4-mother recipe, high flow is better for lighter roasted coffees. If you're doing a high flow or low contact quick shot, this is not going to do nearly as well as something that is more built for it with lower fines, right? We're doing fast shots. You want less fines for less that extraction. You get it. So anyway, this is what we'll be using. Now it's time for Saka. Now a tip I do recommend, if you, again, just like the cafes in Naples do with the triple shot, if you want to really optimize your body, I would recommend getting a deeper basket. Maybe do a 22 gram basket or even deeper than that, and you're going to get really fire body. You could even play around with those step down baskets, which will give you, at a constant dose, a much deeper bed. But for right now, all intents and purposes, we're going with 18 grams. Now I'm going to dial it in. Now dialing this in is straightforward. We want it to hit the pressure curve that the Londinium kind of hits, which is immediate peak, and then it descends, similar to what we do with the simple profile, but this one is more pressure forward. So let's go ahead and grind up our coffee. I think this should be good. Now, personally, I'm not a big fan of the temperature target on the Londinium profile, but we're just not going to mess with it. You can go in and lower it. I would normally lower this to like 88, which is actually going to give us an input temp of like 85. For dark roast, that's much tastier to me. It's a lot less bitter. But, you know, some of y'all like your bitter stuff, so no judgment. Now, I have your reputation for liking really tea-like, filter-like espresso. I do love me some Saka. And this is proper dark coffee, and you're about to see. Now, I'll be dialing in, so this is just a guess on the grind size. Always start coarser. Always start coarser. Because you'll find you can go too fine and still hit the curve. Maybe it takes a little longer, but it'll taste better if you're on the coarser side of the hump. All right, so we start up with that pre-infusion, that early pressure. It looks like we may be too coarse because we're only at 3 bar. Not ideal. Yeah, that was way too fast. So there's a long 3 bar pre-infusion. A lot of people, obviously there is no preset on the Londinium. It's a spring lever machine. What people do is they pull it down, they let it sit there and saturate with a pump that is feeding that group head. So they pull it down, 3 bar pre-infusion, let it sit for a while with drops coming out. So I need to go quite a bit finer in order to take that into account. So we're going to go quite a bit finer, take that into account. But even still, I mean, look at the texture on that. That's still pretty much Goop City. But it is still thin. We can make that a lot thicker. Pro tip, you can fill as it's purging because the valve's closed. So you can go ahead and start filling for your next shot as it's purging. And it makes things a lot faster. And I'm already heating up. We went about 3 ticks finer. This should allow us to maintain that 3 bar of pre-infusion for a bit. Now, if you're ever confused what a profile should do, you can always go in your phone to the app and you can take a look at go to edit and you can look at the different steps and see kind of what the time limits and whatnot are set up to get an idea of what that profile should look like. But you can also just play around, and if your shot came out at 3 bar, just notice what your actual shot did, and then you can just recreate a profile so that you don't ever go into that 9 bar area. Let's say my whole shot came out before it even hit the 9 bar and you loved it. That means you liked a 3 bar shot. Copy those first few steps and make it for the whole profile. Easy peasy. But I know that this is supposed to have a pre-infusion of 3 bar with only a couple drops coming out. So this time went a lot finer in order to do that. Now I'm actually not going to use that little stool because I want y'all to be able to see a little bit better the goop coming out. I will lose crema as it drops. That's why it's nice to have this little platform. The closer you get the cup up, the more you're going to retain the crema. I don't really care about that. I want you all to see the beauty. All right. So now with this, again, you can use a lot of different profiles, but I definitely recommend maybe a lever style profile to really get the goopiest goop out of your goop. We're going to start this, and then we have the 3 bar free infusion. There we go. Just kind of trickling out. Let's see how many grams we get. We're at about 5 grams. Okay, I could go even finer. You kind of want 5 grams before it hits that 9 bar. But even still, it's looking quite nice. Yeah, we need to go even finer. Wild. So you got to go quite fine with this profile. But look at that. And this isn't even that fresh. This is like 2.5, 3 months off roast. So the dark roast, that's quite old. You're still getting crazy crema. That's like 4 times better than the shot right before. You get a ton of that bouncy marshmallow foam type texture on the tongue. It's very cloudy, like cloud-like texture. Whew, that's wild. But we're going to go finer one more time. We're going to pull one more to kind of match this profile. What I am going to do, because we're having to go quite fine, which is going to increase bitterness, even though I was going to just do this profile, I'm lowering the temperature because it's too hot for me. All right, so on this final one, I went 2 ticks finer. So the idea is hopefully we'll make 5 to 8 grams of liquid in the cup by the time pre-infusion is done. Give us enough time to ramp up and start coming down as a spring lever would. And I lowered the temperature to 89 or so. I may even start it below that though. I pulled so many shots back to back that you'll have even be better like temperature equilibrium earlier as you're going on. I've pulled so many shots today. So I may start just a little earlier. Yeah, 86 degrees is fine with me. All right, here we go. All right, here goes that 3-bar pre-infusion, which kind of emulates, I guess you could say, steam infusion in a way. It's even more, I guess you could say, adequate than a pump pre-infusion, which is what you have on something, pump driven, because we have a water column just kind of pushing through it at 3-bar, which is an immediate fill. So now we're at 9-bar. It's going nice and slow. There we go. Now that is a thick shot for sure. Now, one thing I would do personally to thicken this up that you can do on your own time, play around, see what your preference is, because some people might like it this finely ground. But what you can do is just lessen the pre-infusion time. Because this is so much more effective of a pre-infusion measure than something that's not just blasting a water column on top of the puck, it's so much more effective that you don't need as much time during that pre-infusion, so it's causing you to grind a lot finer. The more pre-infusion you do, the finer you have to grind, right? And since there's already so much inherent puck integrity in dark roast, we don't need to waste that aspect of dark roast. Instead, we could let it be coarse, do less pre-infusion because we're doing that water column pre-infusion immediately. But even still, this is without question the thickest crema we've gotten. It's almost like too thick. And look at that. So those of you crema hounds, and again, this is like 2-3 months off roast, you can get some insane stuff just by being, cognizant of grind size, of the pressure that needs to be hitting, of the water temperature, and just dialing it the way you need it. Now, again, if you're using a high clarity style burr, it's not going to be nearly as good. You can get crema with a blade grinder, okay? Getting crema is not that difficult. It's just pressurized hot water with little headspace through freshly ground dark roast. Easy as pie. I preferred the previous shot, but this one does have like a more, you could almost say crystallized crema. The crema in the previous one was more fluffy. This one is thicker though. It's just a little bit more, I don't know. It's like when I swirl it, you have like a clump of crema in the middle as opposed to that nice integrated fluffy texture we had on the previous one. So I think going this fine, again, kind of ruins some of the crema. So I would recommend, say on the coarser side, the answer to all espresso is be as coarse as you can be without losing the profile you're wanting to have. All right, if you want to achieve 9-bar, be as coarse as you can be while it touches 9-bar and then let it safely come down. If you're wanting to do 4-bar, then again, flow is most important. But if you have some weird obsession with making sure you hit 4-bar, go as coarse as you can where it'll barely hit 4-bar. Be on the coarser side of what is the proverbial volcano and this volcano effect that people talk about. You can look it up. We won't get into it. But anyway, that is how we can approach dark roast on the Meticulous. Pick a profile, ideally some sort of lever style profile or something like my simple, which is essentially a lever style profile depending on how you grind it. And then just focus on that grind size and ensuring that you have lessened headspace, deep puck, coarse grounds, and then just tailor it from there. You have the tools, you've got the machine, now just make some goop. Easy.